Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, turning our attention to week 2 and taking a look at a really intriguing cross-conference matchup as the Utah Utes head on the road to play a Baylor Bears team that, you talk about disappointing week 1 losses. Baylor's at the top of the list there. We've been high on both these programs, right? I don't think there's anyone higher in the country than you with Kyle Whittingham and what this Utah Utes program has been the last couple of years. And then Baylor, too. Like, we've shown a lot of love to Dave Aranda and what he's been able to do with this program. It's going to be an intriguing matchup. I think there's some key matchups to look at for both of these teams. Now, before we get into it, again, just want to say thank you to you guys. The amount of support you guys have shown the boys during all these game breakdowns truly does mean a lot. So, one, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. But more importantly, and again, I say this, and it's truly the best part about doing this, is hearing from you guys, learning from you guys in the comment section. Drop your picks in the comment section, keys to the game. We'll chop it up there again. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Dill, I'm going to give you the T-box here. Utah, Baylor, two of your favorite teams in the country. How we feeling?
Yeah, and they're obviously coming off of two very different week ones.
Yes.
You look that Utah team, that defense especially, that looks like back to what we expect from like a peak, really good Utah team. And last year they were obviously very young, but they're back. They're playing very physical, and they're not giving up a lot of easy stuff, which is to me felt like their problem last year. So that unit looks like it's coming into their age, if you will, and they're coming into a Baylor team that, especially without Blake Shapen, that offensive line especially, I don't know what they're going to do to kind of right the ship, but something's got to change. And I will say, if anyone's going to do it, it's Dave Aranda's just been rock solid for a long time, and we'll see if they can correct it or get it going enough so that they can be competitive. But man, that showing they had last week is not even close.
That's the most frustrating part is, like, I feel like there's some talent on this Baylor offense that I was really excited about. I thought Blake Shapen actually looked pretty solid. That being said, like, you take a look at the identity of this Baylor team the last couple of years when they were, competing in the Big 12. Like, it was line of scrimmage, offensive line, defensive line, some of the best units in the country, and you turn on the Texas State game, and it's like unrecognizable, the identity of this Baylor team. And I guess you talk about matchups to this game, and the key matchup here, this Baylor offensive line that just struggled so much against Texas State is going up against the Utah front seven that, check my notes, 7 tackles for a loss, 5 sacks against Florida last week, who's thought to have a pretty good offensive line. My biggest concern for Baylor is I don't know how they're going to block and give protection and establish the run against this Utah defense that seemed to be firing on all cylinders on Thursday night.
Yeah, because you look at that front seven. Some guys really felt like they emerged. Jonah Ellis, wasn't super familiar with his game, but he came
Classic Utah. You don't know these guys, and then they just become studs.
Like, very dominant. I thought Logan Fano played very, very good as a transfer. That's just, to me, it's like that was missing a little bit last year. Those really good defensive linemen who could create pressure on their own. And that's not to say Utah did a good job mixing in blitzes and getting off after Graham Mertz and that Florida offense in a variety of ways. But, man, when they have a front four that I think can more consistently generate some pressure, that feels like this is a very dangerous Utah team, because you look, they've always been very good, but when they're really good, they have a front four who can dominate.
And we talked about it. Like, the all the talk has been Cam Rising with and the health of Cam Rising with this Utah team, and not enough has been talked about. This is a Utah team that prides themselves and kind of relies on player development. They don't bring in top 20 or top 15, top 10 recruiting classes, although they're a top 10 team every single year. That speaks to the player development, getting guys in, getting them in the system, in the weight room. This felt like the year. Like, last year, this was a pretty young Utah team on the defensive side of the ball. And we were saying this defense this year, with all the veterans they have coming back, you have a lot to be excited about. And from anything that we saw week 1, this Utah defense might be one of the better units in the country.
Yeah, especially because they're, again, they got that attitude. I love what they have in the secondary. I think, again, people maybe had some questions with Clark Phillips going to the draft, but you look, I think the safety tandem might be the best in the country. Seon Baki and Cole Bishop are just incredible. And they have that style about them. They both hit hard. They both tackle a lot. They both make plays on the football.
They both fly downhill so fast. It's so wild how much Cole Bishop has his nose in wherever the football is. Cole Bishop's by it. He's just got an incredible knack for being a playmaker. Though my biggest concern, and then we'll take a look at Utah's offense, is Baylor has relied heavily on establishing the run to hit explosive plays. So like they establish the run, you bring safeties in the box, and then they go play action, try to hit a deep ball. You look at this team, like I don't know how they establish the run. So I don't know how they go play action and hit the big plays. And then I just don't know how they consistently can work the football down the field against this Utah team. For me, there are so many question marks about how this Baylor team, especially without Blake Shapen, is going to be able to score. I don't know. I don't even know if they get to like 21 points in this game.
Well, and that's the problem because you got Dave Aranda saying like, yeah, we want to get Richard Reese the ball. I mean, he had under 10 carries. It's like he's got to have probably 15 to 20, I think, for the most part for Baylor. It's like he is the identity. He runs the way they want to run their offense. Very heavy, very physical, very good runner. But again, if you don't have the offensive line to block for it, which they've had for so many years, it feels like. And in fairness to this Baylor program, they've put a lot of guys to draft. They've lost a couple to the portal. So they've again, they had to kind of reshuffle this whole thing this year. So I guess you can kind of excuse some growing pains, but that was way beyond growing pains, I thought, what they showed against
Yeah,
Texas.
my biggest concern is like you can want to run the football all you want. And you saw this last year, like with this Auburn team. Like you have one of the best running backs in the country in Tank Bigsby. But if you don't have an offensive line that can block and that can get some running lanes going, yeah, ideally you want Richard Reese to have 15 to 20 touches a game, but I don't know if you can possibly do that with how poor this offensive line was against Texas State. And again, Utah is going to present so many more problems than what this Texas State program could present. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for Utah, I can't stress enough the job Ludwig did, Kyle Whittingham did with these two quarterbacks, and just taking a look and say, hey, we don't have our star quarterback in Cam Rising. Many Utah listeners who've been rocking with us for a while know how high we are on this Utah team, and especially Cam Rising. They did such a good job using Barnes, using Johnson in ways that fit their skill set, throwing in wrinkles, and just finding out to score enough points, leaning on this defense. And I kind of expect them to do the same thing. I don't think you're going to see them put up 40 points, but they're going to do enough, play into the defense to, I think, come out and get this win.
Well, and yeah, usually like I don't love watching like the two quarterback offense, but just the way they were able to balance it. It's like they used the guys exactly how you would kind of want. You look, Nate Johnson took a lot of carries and had a very good yards per. He scored a touchdown. And then they had Bryson Barnes who came in and he hit the one deep play and obviously a great throw and great catch by Money Parks. And that's something, frankly, Utah was missing last year. So it's nice to kind of see a glimpse of it this year in terms of having some guys like Money Parks or whoever else can step up and make a play down the field and score a 7-yard touchdown. But I just felt like they balanced those two quarterbacks very well. And I don't have as many questions as maybe I did heading into that Florida game about how this Utah team will weather the Cam Rising injury until he's back. And when he comes back, they're going to, I imagine,
because I remember, a week ago, we were a little concerned. It's like Austin Armstrong, the Florida defensive coordinator, loves to put in different packages. I was like, you got like an inexperienced quarterback. You have a true freshman left tackle starting. Like I was a little bit nervous about this Utah team moving the football consistently on offense. And it wasn't like it was a crazy showing. I think they only put up 24 points, but they did way well more than enough to win that football game. And especially when you're playing opposite one of the best defenses in the country, in my opinion.
And those two, they didn't make any mistakes. And that's a huge thing.
And that's winning football.
If Utah doesn't make mistakes and their defense is playing the way it's playing right now, they should be fine. I mean, the one thing I'll be looking for is can they run the ball a little bit more effectively? And you look, that Baylor defensive line, again, for having guys I thought would good, or I thought were coming in and have good years like Gabe Hall, they were kind of getting run off the football by that Texas State offensive line. I mean, resetting line 3-4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, which I found stunning. I mean, that another thing that's been a hallmark of Dave Aranda teams, a very tough physical defensive lines. Again, units that have lost some guys, obviously, to the draft, but still to come out and show that, I think this is a chance for Utah, frankly, to get this younger offensive line some confidence and start moving some guys and run the ball a little more effectively, frankly, in what they were able to do against Florida, where I really didn't think they dominated.
Yeah, that is true. Like when they ran the ball and had success, it was kind of with those wrinkles, as opposed to like, hey, we're just gonna like match up. And that I am high in the Florida. Like if you've been hearing me talk, like I'm high on that Florida front seven, like in terms of the personnel. So I do expect Utah to have a little bit better of a run game. Dill, let's get to the pick. Utah going on the road, 6.5-point favorites. I'm gonna start. I love Utah. I think and again, I'm confident in Dave Aranda. I think this Baylor team probably looks a lot better in week 10 than it does in week 1 and 2. That being said, I think this Utah defense, I just struggle to see Baylor consistently moving the ball. Utah, I mean, it seems like if Utah loses this game, they're gonna have to play losing football. That is not a language Kyle Whittingham knows how to speak. So give me Utah on the points. I think they win this by more than a touchdown. I feel pretty good about it.
I want to say that, and obviously, if you listen to me for the last 10 minutes, it feels like, yeah, I was like way on Utah, and yeah, I think Utah's in a really good spot. But I mean, the fact that this line is sitting at where it's at, if we're just talking like more pure gambling, that almost has to raise your eyebrow a little bit. And again, I will say, like, I do think there's an element of like overreacting. Yeah, that's a horrible, horrible loss to Texas State. But Baylor, to me, is still a very good program in its core. It's like, I mean, obviously, I have to pick Utah because, like, I don't know what about that Baylor loss gives you much confidence. But I do feel like you're like possibly walking into a bit of
that's a good point. That's actually probably worth noting is like and I probably caught myself doing this too much. Like week 1, it's a small sample size. Baylor might have came in and kind of sleepwalking, maybe looking past and looking at the opportunity to play Utah at home with a backup quarterback. So maybe this Baylor team just kind of was sleepwalking through this game. Maybe we're overreacting a little bit, but from what you
said, like, I do think this defensive line, as much as I thought it played very poorly, I feel like they got the guys. Like, there are a bunch of handful of guys that defense that I think are really good. I think TJ Franklin and Gabe Hall, both very good players. I'm stunned they came out and played as poorly as they did, but I mean, I don't know.
I'll just close it on this. We're not used to, and you can say this about both coaches. We're not used to either of these coaches underperforming to their talent level. You know what I mean? Like, and what you saw week 1 was this Baylor team from a talent standpoint. I'm not saying they're the most talented team in college football, but they're a hell of a lot more talented than Texas State. We're not used to seeing a Dave Aranda coach team play below their talent level.
Which makes me think he might just come back and have this team like very hungry. And again, I don't love using the emotional like battles and so forth as like your decisions on how you pick these games necessarily. But I don't know, college football, there's a lot of that to it. And if you can get a more hungry Baylor team that wants to go kind of prove themselves, I just think this Baylor team is, at the end of the day, it's not as bad as people think it is based on what they did against State. And you still do have Cam Rising out for Utah. And that, to me, is a massive hole because Cam Rising, as much as I thought Barnes and Nate Johnson as a tandem played effective football, that wasn't like dominant offense.
Yeah, don't. I mean, what, they only had, I think, 270 yards of total offense. It wasn't like
a lot of that was, and there were obviously points off of takeaways and some other mistakes that Florida made, but I don't know. I mean, I'm picking Utah, but it's
riding the fence a little bit. I will not be riding the fence. I'll be loving Utah.
If this game isn't scaring you, then you like haven't watched enough football.
No, Utah minus 6.5. I don't think this Baylor team can block up front.
I am right.
Book it. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel and leave the picks in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys, and we'll talk to y'all later.